So my mother arrived in England when she was about 17, and she went to work as an au pair in St Ives near Cambridge. And my father had got a scholarship to Cambridge to study there, and they met. And a couple of years later, I suppose, I was born. At the age of 3, actually, I only spoke German, and it wasn't until I went to school that I discovered, painfully I suppose, that it wasn't a good idea to be German, and the kids there didn't like having a German around. So I kind of stopped being German, and indeed, sadly, over the course of a few years, I stopped speaking German. I mean, obviously, you know, the search for where your mother came from, simple beginnings, obviously, but it's not something that sustains you over many years. But I was very interested in the kind of technological side of things. The internet was very much in development, certainly during the early part. Indeed, you know, I was very fascinated initially from a painter's perspective about the kind of blockiness of these very pixelated images that were there. For instance, I just kind of thought they looked like brush marks. So I spent quite a lot of time during those years painting images that kind of tried to, in some respect, respond or replicate the kind of blockiness of those images. You know, I became fascinated by the kind of politics of it. There was, you know, I didn't really know too much about sort of Second World War politics, but there were kind of things that seemed to somehow resonate with current issues, and certainly coming from a kind of, I mean, I'm not kind of massively political. I don't join, you know, I've never joined a party or anything of that nature, but I've always been a bit of a lefty, and I was concerned about the way this country and other countries in the West, if you like, were seemingly becoming more and more authoritarian. They were in some respects, although it's more kind of corporate these days, it seemed to somehow resonate with the kind of fascism of that period of time, where, you know, the period of time that my mother was born in, and going through the kind of issues that I was discovering in Silesia. So I got this little iPod Touch, and it's a 4-inch screen, and actually, to be honest, it stayed in its box for a year. I just didn't use it until a mate at work, who'd got a fancy iPhone in those days, he said, "Have you seen what David Hockney's doing with his iPhone?" And I hadn't. So he showed me, and I had no idea that these things could be used visually. So I downloaded the same software or app, as we call them now, that David Hockney was using, and just started doodling, started playing around with it. In the 90s, mid-90s, I was, in the holidays, working at a chateau in France, doing large-scale kind of ceiling and wall paintings. And I had a student who was a born painter. And when he was about 17, I asked his parents' permission to take him with me to help me paint the paintings in the chateau. Now, that went on for a few years, and later on, after he'd sort of been through art school, he started doing commissions himself in his own right, and has since become a kind of well-renowned mural painter of all sorts, and he's known for doing sort of very large multi-story adverts for Nike and Gucci and the film industry and music industry, and and obviously, you know, during our time in France, we became good friends, even though there's a big age difference, so we kind of occasionally meet up for beers, and there was a time when I kind of thought, well, actually, when we were sort of thinking about this exhibition, I said what I really, really would like was for him to come and help me paint one of my kind of landscapes, or not landscapes as such, but they're from Google Earth. In the last couple of years, he's actually also taken on as assistant another student of mine, Jacob, and so, you know, to have the two of them working on the landscape for me, I just thought it was kind of very fitting, because obviously pretty much half my life has been sort of spent in art schools. One of the problems is that work for Considering Silesia stopped about last May. I did, at the beginning of the pandemic, I did quite a lot. I was quite energised by what was going on, and I was kind of looking at a particular new strand of things that was fascinating me. I was focusing on this hotel in what was then Breslau, now Wrocław, the capital of Lower Silesia, which is well known and has been a place where Adolf Hitler gave a major speech leading up to World War II, or his invasion of Poland, and so I was working on that. But I've still got things I want to do as far as the kind of landscapes are concerned, and I'm kind of toying with the ideas of going back to sort of analogue painting. Mind you, that takes a long time because you've got to wait for stuff to dry, layers. So I don't know. Now that sort of teaching this year is coming to an end, I'm going to spend this summer kind of working out what the next steps are.